This movie is about the unique love story between Vivian, who's into quantum physics, and Roy, a troubled boy who lives in a dangerous part of town. The movie begins with a scene of an accident. We hear panting and hard breathing, as well as someone's heart racing. The scene changes, and we see our protagonist Vivian on the beach, dressed in all white. It looks like she is in a dream. She compares love with quantum physics, saying that when two particles are separated after interacting with each other, they're no longer distinct particles. Life can separate two people, but they will always carry a part of the other with them. We see Vivian with her friend at the school pool, watching two boys compete in swimming. One of the contestants stops for one moment and stays still in the pool. Vivian's boyfriend Steven ends up winning, and the other contestant Roy tries to leave as fast as he can. The coach stops him and tries to find out why the boy had stopped swimming for a moment. Roy tries to leave, and they get into an argument. Roy tells him that he is not his dad and shouldn't be getting into his business. The coach warns him that he could lose the scholarship if he doesn't win, but Roy tells him that he doesn't care. On their ride back, Vivian's friend Christine asks Steve about Roy. She thinks he is attractive and wants to go out with him. Steve tells her that he had told Roy about her, but Roy didn't say anything. He says that he has never seen Roy with anyone, anywhere. Christine assumes that he is a nerd, just like her friend Vivian. Vivian smiles and asks her why she would ever date a guy like Roy. Christine tells her that she doesn't plan on marrying him, and that a one-night stand would be enough. They all laugh, and Steve says that Roy is a hothead, who should watch his mouth. He mentions that the swimming competition is coming up, and Vivian gets saddened, as she won't see her boyfriend for some time. They arrive at their destination, and Christine takes the chance to talk to her friend alone. She tells Vivian that she hasn't been the same ever since she started dating Steve, but Vivian tells her that she's happy. Christine argues and says that Vivian isn't really happy. Vivian says that happiness in relationships is overrated. She stops for a moment when she realizes what she has said, and both of them laugh. Christine hopes her intimate life is good, and Vivian says that is overrated as well. On the other side of town, we see Roy coming home. He sees his sister playing outside and asks her whether she has done her homework. She says she has done it all, except math. Roy tells her that she will be needing math to buy the groceries when he goes to work overseas. The little girl says that she wants to go with him, but he tells her that he wants to go alone, as a growing experience. She tells him that she is grown and can help, and he jokingly asks her to help him set up the table. Roy starts preparing dinner when their father walks in. He greets his daughter and asks Roy how his swimming had gone. Roy tells him that he did all right, but his father tells him that all right isn't enough for him to win. He reminds him that his future is in swimming, and if he doesn't plan to do that, he should work with him in the garage. Roy tells him that he is not good enough, but his father screams at him that he's setting the bar too high. Roy doesn't want to hear it, so he storms out. We see Vivian with her mother having dinner. They are talking to Vivian's father on a Skype call, and he asks Vivian whether she's ready for her exam. Vivian admits that she is scared, but her father tells her to hang on, because he will be coming home soon. After they hang up the call, Vivian gets a message from Steve, saying that his connection is bad. She texts him to call her when he can. After dinner, Vivian goes to study in her room. Different equations and exercises fill her notebook. To practice better, Vivian has written some formulas on her mirror. She learns when the particles are separated. The moment something happens to one particle, the other one feels it. Roy is sneaking into the pool to practice his swimming. He gets into the pool and does a couple of laps. While swimming, he imagines a woman drowning in the water, but he can't help her. He gets out of the pool and sits on the side. Vivian is in her room when she hears a car pull up on the street. She looks through her window and sees her mother getting out of someone's car. She receives a text from Steve saying that he can't call her because he's busy. She lies on her bed and ends up falling asleep. She wakes up the next morning and sees that she has 2 missed calls from him, but decides not to call him back. Her mother is in the shower, so Vivian looks through her phone. Text messages from a mysterious man who is being flirty with her mother and inviting her for another date make Vivian's stomach curl. Her mother calls out to her and tells her that she will be working late that day, but Vivian knows the truth. She keeps quiet and doesn't tell anyone that she knows. Steve comes to the house and Vivian lets him in. He says that he wanted to text her, but Vivian tells him that he hasn't. She tells him that she needs him, but he's never around. He tells her that he has been under a lot of pressure, but Vivian tells him that she has been under a lot of pressure with studying, yet she still finds time for him. He apologizes and asks her how her studying is going. She tells him that she loves quantum physics, but it can get tiring. She feels like she doesn't know anything, even though she spends a lot of time studying. He hugs her, but it doesn't look like she's comforted in any way. Night comes, and Vivian decides to go to the place where her mother will be meeting another man. She gets close to the restaurant and sees through the window that her mother is snuggling up to a man. Her heart breaks when she sees her kissing him, and she runs away from that place. She stumbles upon a gang, and they start teasing her. They take her purse and circle her, so she can't run away. Vivian tries to get her purse back, but they throw it around, and that makes it hard for her to grab it. Ray shows up out of nowhere and tells them to leave her alone. They appear to know him, so they listen to his orders. Roy walks Vivian away from the group and offers to call her a ride. She says that she doesn't need his help. He stops her and tells her that a girl like her shouldn't be in such places. She tells him that he doesn't know her, but he tells her that he knows her boyfriend. Vivian asks him not to tell Steve where she's been, and Roy promises not to. Vivian gets in her ride, and Roy watches her disappear. The day of the test comes, and Vivian is revising her material before she gets into the building. Anxiety kicks in once she's in the exam room. She can't take it, so she runs out as fast as she can. She rides her bike straight to her best friend's house. Christine is surprised to see her so early, as there will be a party at her house at night. Vivian asks her for the strongest alcohol she has, and Christine is surprised to hear that she will be drinking. Vivian says that she will drink anything she can that night, so Christine offers her some vodka. Vivian takes it and chugs the vodka from the bottle. They get to the window to smoke, and Christine notices that something is wrong with her best friend. She asks her whether something's wrong, but Vivian lies to her and says that there isn't. Roy tucks his sister into bed, and she asks him to read her a story. He agrees and proceeds to read The Cicada and the Ant. His sister asks whether their mother has read the story to him, and he says that she has read many stories to him. She says that she misses their mother, and Ray tells her that he misses her as much as she does. Meanwhile, Vivian is lost in her thoughts. Christine is looking through her closet to find a nice costume for her. She finds a sexy cop costume and hands it to her. Vivian says that the costume is too tight, but Christine tells her that's the point. After putting his sister to bed, Roy goes to the school pool. He hears someone talking in the showers and gets closer to the sound. He sees Steve and their coach being intimate with each other. Steve tells him that he will be swinging by after the party, and the coach smiles. He kisses him, and the coach leaves. Roy makes himself visible to Steve, and Steve asks him how long he has been standing there. Roy tells him that he has been coming to train every night, so Steve tries to gaslight him. He tells him he won't tell the coach about him sneaking in, and offers a hand. Roy doesn't want to hear whatever Steve has to say, so he leaves. Steve stops him and tells him that he will lose everything and live in the trailer for the rest of his life if he tries to expose him. Roy knows that he can't do anything, so he leaves. At the party, Vivian is having fun and dancing in the middle of the room. Roy comes to the party and sees her. He is covered with a mask, but he gets close to her, and they dance together. She asks him for his name, and he leaves in a hurry. She follows him and sees him trying to stop a fight, in which his friend is involved. One guy jumps in and tries to tackle Roy. Roy gets pissed off and punches the guy a couple of times before he's pulled back by Vivian. They leave the party and go to the fair. Vivian asks him why he hangs out with someone like that, and he says that he had grown up with him. He says that he had given him all of his tattoos, so he stuck with him like he stuck with them. Vivian laughs and asks him when he had gotten his first tattoo. Roy says that he had gotten his first tattoo when he was 13, and Vivian calls it impressive. She says that it must have been interesting in his neighborhood, and he asks her why she's been there. She tells him that she has secrets, and he calls her a kid. Vivian suggests they play a game, but Roy tells her off and says that he doesn't have any secrets. Vivian tries to leave, but he stops her and tells her to start first. She admits not taking the test, and he admits that he sneaks to the school pool every night. She asks him why he trains every night if he isn't on the team, and he matches her energy by asking why she studies for a test that she ends up not taking. He asks her what's so interesting about physics, and she tells him that she finds it to be a lot easier than life and that she loves numbers. Roy says that his favorite number is 7, but Vivian is distracted by his good looks. She notices that he's bleeding and offers to bring him ice. When she comes back with a can, she sees that Roy is gone. Vivian has a dream about being with Roy, and her fantasy is cut off by a notification from her phone. She reads a text message from Steve saying that he had been at the party but hadn't seen her. She decides not to answer and locks her phone. Roy goes to the coach the next morning. He tells him that he had stopped in the middle of swimming because he thought that he had already blown it. He asks his coach whether it ever happens to him, and the coach hands him a timer as he gets into the pool. Roy times him and can't believe how fast he is. His coach tells him that he needs to be fearless and not let anything hold him back. Roy asks him for another chance, and the coach says that he needs to beat Steve. Roy asks whether he'll be put on the team if he does, and the coach tells him that he won't leave a winner behind. The race comes, and Roy and Steve are getting prepared. Roy ends up winning the race and even impresses his coach. Steve is pissed off and doesn't even congratulate Roy. Vivian goes to see Steven after the race, and he asks her why she wasn't at the party. She tells him that she called him a couple of times, but he didn't answer. He tells her that she's always somewhere else and asks if she's considering asking him how he is after losing the race. Vivian looks at him and asks him why he didn't ask her about her test. Steve realizes that he had messed up as well and admits that he had forgotten. Vivian isn't surprised and tells him that he doesn't have time for her anymore. He asks her to forget about it and move on, but she tells him that's what he always wants to do. She tells him that if he's not ready to fight for their relationship, then they should break up. Steve doesn't acknowledge her and says that he has to talk to his coach. Vivian arrives home and sees that her father is back. She sees him and her mother talking secretively, so she asks them what they're talking about. Her father greets her and asks about the test, but she doesn't say anything. He says that it's okay, even if she failed. Her mother chimes in and says that it isn't fine, because she has been studying the whole year for it. Vivian asks her mother to think about how hard it was for her to study, while knowing that her mother is seeing someone. Her father steps closer and tells her that they have decided to separate a year ago, but didn't tell her because of the exam. Vivian realizes that she has been lied to by both of her parents and asks them not to speak to her as she storms out of the house. She gets to the road and tries to calm herself down. She gets a text from Steve. He says that he will be going to Rome and would love to talk to her when he comes back. She decides to go to Rome as well, but doesn't tell her boyfriend about it. She gets into a taxi and changes into fancier clothes before she arrives at the hotel. She gets to the reception, lies that she has forgotten the key to her boyfriend's room, and asks for another one. The receptionist asks her for his name and room number, and she tells him the name, but says that she forgot the number because of jet lag. He asks her whether she had forgotten her bags because of jet lag as well, and Vivian realizes that she had messed up. She tells him that she wants to surprise her boyfriend, so the receptionist tells her that he can walk her to his room, and if he confirms her story, she can stay. They get into the elevator, and when the door opens, they see Roy in front of them. He asks Vivian what she's doing there, so the receptionist assumes that he is her boyfriend. Vivian says that he is, and Roy goes along with it. The receptionist hands her the key and asks her to be careful with the jet lag. They start walking to the room, and Vivian thanks him for going along with it. Roy assures her that it's not a problem, and tells her the number of the room where Steve is staying. She gets into the room and sees no one there, so she decides to hang out until Steve comes back. After some time, she hears a knock on the door and goes to get it. She opens the door, thinking that it will be Steve, but Roy stands in front of her. He asks her for a walk to make up for disappearing on her, and she says yes. They take a walk in the park, and Vivian tells him that she is excited to see the photos he had taken. He tells her that he only takes pictures of things, and not people. She asks him whether he doesn't like her, or people in general, and he tells her that he likes both, but he doesn't need pictures to prove it. She asks him how he's going to remember the trip with her, and he tells her that he doesn't want to remember it. He asks her to move out of the way so he can take a picture, but she ends up sneaking into his shot. She steals his camera because he's being rude. He chases her, and they run around like little kids. He eventually catches her, and they have a moment where they look into each other's eyes. Vivian breaks the silence and suggests walking around the park. She asks him how long had he lived in Rome before moving back to the US. He tells her he lived there until the end of middle school, and she assumes that he didn't want to leave. Roy tells her that it is a long story that she doesn't want to hear. He asks her to walk up the stairs and only look back when he tells her. She thinks it's absurd and doesn't trust him, but he promises to tell her a story about trust. They start climbing the steps, and he starts the story. A long time ago, a man named Orpheus was in love with a nymph Eurydice, who ended up passing away one day. Orpheus makes a deal with the king of the underworld, who promises to bring her back to life on one condition. Orpheus can't look back at her on their way out, and she'll be walking behind him all the time. The deal is hard, because she will be calling out his name constantly, and he will be tempted to look back. Roy takes her hands and proceeds to guide her to the top. When they arrive at the top of the stairs, Roy asks her to open her eyes, and she is amazed to see the whole city from the top. They go kayaking next, and Vivian remembers that he didn't finish the story. He tells her that at the end of the exit, Orpheus heard silence, and that's what made him turn. However, he saw nothing behind him once he did so. Vivian says that mythology is messed up, but Roy tells her that love can make you a fool. He asks her whether there are any similarities between love and mathematics, and Vivian tells him that numbers used to remind her of love, but she doesn't think it's like that anymore. She asks him whether he believes in love, and he says he does, but he doesn't want it. They got to a hotel bar and have a couple of drinks. Vivian breaks a glass with her hand accidentally, and the bartenders take care of it. Roy orders 2 more margaritas, and the bartender asks him whether they're guests at the hotel. Roy lies and says a random room number. Vivian gets worried, but he tells her that he has a plan. They take their drinks and sit at a table, so there's less attention on them. Vivian asks him whether he's nervous about the competition the following day, and he says he isn't. He knows he's not going to win. She asks him what he would do if he wins, and he says that his father will finally leave him alone. Vivian asks him about his mother, and he says that his mother passed away. She asks him how it happened, and he tells her that his mother had drowned. He tried to save her, but couldn't. Vivian gets sad and doesn't know what to say. Roy hears the staff whispering about their room and tells Vivian to run. They run through the different rooms until they end up in a dancing hall. They dance together without a single worry on their mind. They go to the closed pool next, and Roy gets in first. Vivian gets in as well and complains about there not being any music. Roy looks at her seductively and tries to get closer to her. She swims to the other end, but he follows her. She tries to start a conversation, but he cuts her off by kissing her. They kiss, but Vivian breaks it off and says they need to leave. They get back to the hotel and say goodbye to each other. Vivian goes to Steven's room, and her heart breaks when she sees Steven sound asleep with his coach in the same bed. They wake up, and Steven tries to explain it to her, but she runs out of the room. She sees Roy in the hall and asks him whether he knew, but he says nothing. She runs out of the hotel, and Roy follows her. He catches up to her, and she asks him why he didn't tell her. He admits that he didn't know what to do, and she tells him he should have told her the truth. She asks him if his plan was to get her drunk and kiss her. He tells her that she wanted the kiss too, and it's not his fault her boyfriend is cheating on her. She mentions his story about trust, and tells him that she can never trust him. She tells him that she can never be with a guy like him, someone who tries and fails all the time. Roy walks off, and Vivian runs after him. She tells him that she didn't mean to say that, but he doesn't want to hear it. When she tries to catch up to him, a car hits her in the middle of the road. Roy runs to her and holds her in his arms. The accident reminds him of the time he couldn't save his mother, and a flashback of the event plays. Vivian is taken back to her town, where she can recover. Christine and Steven look at her through the hospital window. Christine asks him how they weren't together when she was hit, and he says he couldn't go out because of the competition the next day. She asks him where he'd been and why Roy was with her. Steven lies to her and says that he had dinner with Vivian before her accident. He says he's sorry and should have been there for her. The doctor talks to Vivian's parents and tells them that their daughter had suffered a lot, but with time, she will recover. Roy ends up working at his father's garage. One day, he is working on a car with his father. His father tells him that the coach had stopped by and asked for him. He asks him whether he's sure of backing down. Roy says that they don't need him. The team's already won. His father asks him to consider going back, but Roy asks what's wrong with him. He says that he has begged him to come to the garage, and now that he's there, he wants him to consider going back. Roy tries to walk away, but his father stops him by asking about Vivian. He tells him that she's stable, and his father tells him that he can take the rest of the day off. Roy gets off work and goes to visit Vivian that night. He sneaks into the hospital room and sits by her side. A nurse comes by and tells him that visiting hours are over, but he tells her that he works late. She gives him 5 minutes, and that's enough for him. He uses those 5 minutes to play a song for her. He leaves in a hurry once the song's finished. Vivian wakes up the next day, but before she does, she sees the same dream of her in all white at the beach. She goes to the doctor to be examined for injuries. He asks her whether she remembers something about that night, and she tells him that she doesn't remember anything. He asks her about Steve, and she says that she remembers him. She asks the doctor if anything about her has changed. He tells her that she's making progress, and they believe she'll be fine, but it will take some time. The doctor meets with her parents, and he tells them that Vivian has short-term memory loss. All she needs to do is rest to get better. Vivian gets home and goes to her room. She looks through her stuff and finds a Polaroid picture of her on the night she got hit. She instantly remembers the accident, but can't remember the face of the guy who helped her. Christine and Steven visit her later in the day, and Christine seems to be suspicious of the whole situation. She tries to find out more about the accident, but Vivian doesn't remember much. Steven comes in, and Vivian asks him about the photos he took while they were there. She doesn't remember Roy, so she assumes Steven had taken the pictures. He tells her that he had left everything at the hotel, so there were no pictures with him. Vivian pulls out the photo Roy had taken of her, and tells him that she has something. He plays along, but insists he doesn't have anything on him. After leaving the hospital, Christine goes to Roy's to talk to him about the accident. She asks him if he had taken Polaroids of Vivian on the day of the accident. He says that he had taken some in the park, and Christine tells him that Vivian had woken up. He asks how she's doing, and she says that Vivian is fine, but she believes that she was with Steven. Roy asks her whether she told her anything, and Christine says no. He tells her not to say anything to Vivian, and Christine doesn't want to accept the fact that he won't fight for her. Roy tells her that every time he gets closer to someone he loves, it ends in disaster. He tells her that something happened between them that night, but it shouldn't have happened. Roy goes to the garage the next day and sees his father. He is obviously sad, and his father notices that. Roy tells him that Vivian had woken up, and his father says that he believed that she will. Roy gets quiet, so his father tells him that it wasn't his fault. Roy says that he'll never forgive himself, but his father says he should be the one asking for forgiveness. He admits that Roy drowned with their mother the day she did. Roy survived, but is afraid to move on, and his father feels guilty about it every day. He should have been there for them both. His father starts crying, and Roy hugs him. He apologizes to his father, and his father says that he has to make up his mind. He doesn't want Roy to be the mess up he is. Before Roy goes, his father gives him a vintage car and tells him to hit the road. He also tells Roy that he is fired, only because he wants him to pursue his dream. Vivian goes to dinner with her parents, and as her father pours the champagne, she remembers her mother cheating. She asks them to stop pretending that they're in love, but gets surprised once her parents tell her that they're not pretending. Tears fill her eyes, and she feels like a little kid again. Roy sneaks into Vivian's house while they're at dinner and leaves a surprise for her. Vivian sees lights with Polaroid pictures attached to them. It's her whole trip to Rome in picture form. She sends Steven a video, thanking him for the kind gesture, and goes to look at the pictures in detail. She grabs a couple and starts remembering her day with Roy. By the time she gets to the last picture, she remembers everything. Tears fill her eyes as she realizes that Steven had lied to her. Steve goes to his coach after practice and sees him packing. He asks him what he's doing, and the coach tells him that he needs a break. He admits that he has been struggling seeing his face every day and can't do it anymore. Steve asks about the team, and he tells him that a new coach will be there tomorrow. The coach admits that he hates goodbyes and planned to leave without saying it. Steven tries to stop him, and the coach asks him whether he's stopping him for himself. He looks at his coach, but can't seem to admit his feelings. The coach leaves, and Steven starts crying. He goes to Vivian's after practice, and she immediately asks him if they were together on the day of the accident. He tells her that they were, and she tells him that she needs some clarification. She points to some pictures and asks him to explain what is going on in them. His answers are short and lack detail, so Vivian gets frustrated. She asks him what she had worn to their dinner, and he says he can't remember. She can't believe he doesn't remember what she wore on the day she almost passed away. She asks why they aren't together in any of the pictures, and even asks for his camera. He tells her that he had forgotten everything at the hotel, so she asks him how the pictures ended up in her room. He doesn't know what to say and insists that he was with her. Vivian screams at him and asks him where he had been. She drives Steven to the point of honesty, and he tells her that he was with the coach. He even admits to being with the coach for 3 months. He leaves, and Vivian tries to throw away the photos. She sees something written on the back of one photo, and it asks her to come to a motel. She goes to the motel and tries to find the room. Once she's there, she knocks on the door, and Roy opens it. She gets in, and he takes her coat. They get closer, and he says that he has missed her. She realizes that it was him she was in Rome with, and asks him why didn't tell her. He says that he had told her in his own way, and admits to having been thinking about their kiss every day. Vivian says that a lot of bad things happened after the kiss, and he asks her whether they should take the risk again. He kisses her, and all of the memories come rushing to her mind. They end up making love all night. The second term for the test comes, and Vivian walks confidently into the exam room. She takes the tests and answers all of the questions. Vivian realizes that quantum physics particle bond is nothing like the human bond. Humans are much more complicated and unpredictable. Roy and Vivian are driving on a road in the middle of nowhere. Though the movie ends with that scene, it is just the beginning of their love.